Bottom, the very bottom little, yep, the little blue circle zoom. Nope, nope, down at the bottom. Go down, 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 down.
The taskbar, yeah.
The taskbar, yep, right there. Click on that. There you go. All yours, Supervisor.
All right, I welcome all of you to this November 6th Town Board Workshop. We've got a interesting agenda. So without further ado, will you join me in our Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Will the clerk call, please?
Councilperson Corbin,
Here.
Councilperson Morelli,
Here.
Councilperson Wolliver.
Here.
Supervisor Cusey.
Here. And first of all, we have a presentation by Code Committee Chair Scott Strock, who's going to talk about the Hamlet code that they have come up with. It's on.
It is now.
Now it is.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when
I
I
saw green.
started up my laptop to show the presentation, it decided to update without asking me if I wanted it to. It says it's working on updates, 100% complete. Don't turn off your computer. But I can't do anything with it right now. There's two choices. One is I can give somebody else a memory stick and we'll work it from there, or you can go on to a different agenda item. I have no idea how long this will take.
I do have it, Scott, if you want me
Okay.
to
Oh.
share my
I
screen.
did make a couple of very minor modifications. I can use the one I gave you, no problem. But is it possible to use this one?
Sure.
It says restarting.
All right.
Just hate to waste everybody's time.
With all the work you and the code committee have put together, you're not wasting our time whatsoever.
But I have no idea if this will be another 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 1 minute.
Do you want me to at least put it in here
Yeah.
and see if I can get it started while we're waiting?
Wow. Let's rush.
Nice.
Oh, it's back to 30% now. Now it's back to restarting. Oh, it turned black. That's a good sign.
That's never a good sign. Okay, USB drive, let's try that. Town of Rush,
Yes,
all right,
that should be code committee.
code committee.
And CNMUH. You click on date modified.
Okay, next one.
Probably today.
11/6 at 9:32. All right. Now, what I hope, I already had the other one open, so now I don't know which is which. Oh, 11/6 versus. God, I may have, do you know what you changed? Hang on, I'm gonna close them both, because I already had the one open. that,
Well, the one you just stuck in should have a date of 11/6, even though the title says 11/6 in both of them.
okay. I just closed out the one you had sent me yesterday. I'll share my screen. All right,
So I'll have to tell you when to change screens.
I apologize.
Oh, my fault. I should have gotten here an hour early. Who knew? So this is about the commercial and mixed use hamlet, which we abbreviate as MUH code update proposals from the code committee. Code committee, just a reminder, is David Watson from the Conservation Board, John Morelli from the Comprehensive Plan Committee. John recently resigned and he's been replaced in the future by Robert Kraus, although we have not yet had a meeting with Robert. We will miss John. He was a great asset. Of course, John Limbeck, building inspector, and me from the planning board.
I apologize.
No problem.
I just trying to.
I'll keep talking. So what we'll be talking about essentially is the purple areas that you see on that part of the town zoning map. Those are all the commercial districts. The commercial district on the right is the hamlet. Of course, that's the one we're proposing to change. We're talking about both or all of the purple areas. So okay, change it now. Talk about commercial vote first. This was issued to the town board on October 29th, and obviously we're talking about it here on November 6th. Next slide. We really had two overarching goals to fix the current commercial code. One was better specify permitted uses. That's not so much a shortfall as just being more specific and kind of following a format that most other towns use. Our town code essentially said one line, retail and service. So now we're specifying more specifically permitted uses, which I think it's better for everybody involved, because I think even applicants were coming to us and saying, is my use really permitted without seeing something more like it listed? And then we want to provide missing safeguards to include aesthetics and safety, particularly on driveways that are common in other towns' codes and consistent with our previous proposal for the limited industrial districts. Next slide.
I'm wanting to do what we want it to do.
Just
You
pushing
should
the
only
base
have to
one.
click, do a left click.
Well, I moved it before and now it's not moving. So let's just go to this one. This is the one you're on, right, Scott?
Yes, I think so. Okay, so there is a listing of all the specifics. Obviously, it's too small to read, but it just goes to show how many there are. In addition to all those, we added vegetable and field crop farming and multiple uses per lot, just as we did on limited industrial. Go ahead. So we've reduced some use restrictions to be more flexible. For example, previously, as most of our town code said, no outside storage. Now we allow it with a special permit, just as we did for limited industrial. In the medium term, if this gets approved along with the limited industrial code that we proposed previously, we can omit the infamous standalone section 120-60 landscaped malls section, which has been a problem in a number of ways, in that it's generally hard to find. It's listed by itself somewhere else in the code, and it has a bizarre statement of concrete curb or similar structure at least 1 foot high. And people seem to argue about what that means, and rightly so. So we can get rid of that and still have the protections we want for parking lot setbacks with the proposal. John Limbeck will be very happy with that. Some other missing safeguards, just like the limited industrial code, we specify waste dumpster locations, in this case at the rear of the lot, which is typical of commercial uses. As opposed to limited industrial, we just say behind the front line of the building. The access driveways and parking lot setbacks will be specified, which is the thing that does away with the so-called landscape halls. Specifying garage door and loading dock locations, again, on the sides or rear of the building and not the front in general. Building architecture, landscaping, and we specify a maximum building size, again, of 50,000 square feet, but can be exceeded with a special permit. And then we list maximum lot coverage as well. That always was listed. It was listed as 50%. Now we're proposing now, as a result of some of the feedback from limited industrial, that for limited industrial and commercial, we go to 30% for the building coverage and 65% for total building and so-called hardscape. That would be consistent again with what we're moving to proposing with limited industrial. As we did with limited industrial, we'll make it clear that a new site plan or special permit, whichever is the case, is or both is required for any new building use, including building additions, changes in use to a separate, different, distinct use, and changes to parking, lighting, and other things which have the potential to impact the neighboring property. We did add one new safeguard, and that is a requirement for large commercial lots, because in general, the commercial lots that we have, at least the ones along the primary ones along West Henrietta Road, are some very large. And this is what we found in some other town codes, that in order to prevent strip type development, to reduce more harmonious appearance, and to promote public safety by reducing access cuts to and from public highways, the planning board shall encourage and may require the submission of development plans relating to all adjoining properties held in common ownership. The planning board shall also encourage the submission of coordinated development plans by adjacent owners of similarly zoned property. In our case, it's mostly one common property. The idea here is we really don't want to get in a commercial zone where people are essentially developing frontage lots right along the main road, and then expecting to later on essentially use flag lots for other rest of the development. You'd really rather have people are going to have a money-making enterprise, really have a whole development up front, or at least something. It doesn't mean it all has to be developed at that time, but there has to be a kind of an integrated plan for the whole thing up front, if the planning board so decides. The other one that we added, similar to industrial code, and this kind of falls out of the example with the Werner forefront, previously called Tier 3 solar, where we seem to have some difficulty being sure we can get the screening done. This would give us more authority to do that type of thing, make sure the site requirements are met according to the site plans before a building permit is provided. So we had a lot of go around with John Lippick on this. I think we came to the common understanding that this can be done if it's specified up front. So essentially says that building permits will not be issued unless there's verification, typically by the town engineer, that all the site requirements have been met as well as the building requirements. And this comes right out of our own code, so it's nothing that we made up. Okay, next one. Special permits themselves can be safeguards. So the current commercial code specifies gasoline filling stations are allowed by special permit, but there's nothing in the code, or arguably there's nothing in the code that allows diesel or other fuel service stations, which is kind of strange. So we added diesel and other fuels. Any drive-through facilities, whether they be banks, restaurants, fast food establishments, the drive-through part of those would require a special permit. That has to do with tight turns and congested traffic and that sort of thing. Animal care requires a special permit. That has to do with the fact that there could be waste cleanup, there could be outside pens and noise and that sort of thing. So we want to have a special ability to specify what's required there. Vehicle washing operations, manufacturing, incidental to retail businesses. So that might include even things like breweries and wineries and so on. Then outdoor seating and or live music would require a special permit, and the ability then to specify other things that are similar in nature to those. Yes.
Interrupt you for a second. So I was looking, one of the things I was looking through, or when I was looking through, I noticed, I think cannabis establishments were under permitted uses.
Yes.
And the town board in July made it especially permitted uses, I believe, under the new local laws. I would take a look at,
Okay, so it would have to be moved to the special permit.
that's correct,
Okay.
yeah.
We actually, we talked about whether that should be or not, but didn't know that the town board had already reached a decision.
Yeah, we did that in July. The new local law has cannabis retail dispensaries and cannabis on-site consumption establishments under specially permitted uses.
Okay, super. So it's easy to move. And
Yeah.
by all means.
Our alcohol consumption. Is that under?
They are permitted with a site plan, so they are not specially permitted.
I thought we were gonna try to do the same.
Talked about that too, yeah.
That one, we didn't touch alcohol establishments in this July law, and the only reason I brought it in is because I knew the town board's position on that issue, because we had just done it.
But that could be added.
Yeah, I mean, you
To
could
this
move
part.
any of these from
Yep.
permitted to special.
And of course, that is the town board's prerogative. We make the recommendation, you guys make the decisions and the approvals if they go
I
that
thought
far.
we had talked about
Yeah.
making it the same.
Mhm.
Yeah, there are some things we might push back on, that's not one of them. Okay, just an example of kind of cleanup or some of the cleanup that we're doing. Under permits, it had this unusual statement, no permit shall be issued for construction or use until the applicant has met with the Board of Appeals for review of the zoning law and requirements as it pertains to commercial C districts. So I would wonder if that ever happened, that before somebody got a permit, until the applicant sat down with the Board of Appeals to talk about the zoning laws in general. That's kind of strange. And then it has this also statement about no residential structure shall be erected in commercial C district without a special permit from the planning board after notice and public hearing. Well, special permits do require notice and public hearing, but that's kind of a strange way to handle residential as well. So just to follow up on that, you know, there's lots of residential in the Hamlet commercial district. We'll handle that through the mixed use district. But there are two residences along West Tennietta Road in the commercial district. That's just south of Snyder's Garage. The current commercial code possibly tried to accommodate those in the Hamlet in the bizarre way with that special permit. So we proposed a statement instead, except for dwellings legally, this is redundant and the lawyer should clean this up. Except for dwellings legally already in existence at the time of the code section is approved, there should be no residential uses in the commercial district. Guess we go to the next slide, please. So that's nothing new. That arrow there points to the two properties or one of the top property of the two residential ones in that commercial zone. But actually, the concept of permitting pre-existing non-conformances is embedded in zoning code as 12063 non-conforming uses, and actually there's a statement there for special permits as well. And as I said, there's lots of residential lots that are zoned commercial in the Hamlet. We'll handle those with the mixed-use Hamlet district. So that's a nice segue into mixed-use Hamlet code proposal. This was also issued to the town board by an email attachment October 29. But then again, on November 1, we issued a number of those tables that go across districts that I'll show you some examples of that we have to fill out differently because of creation of another zone. The code committee proposes rezoning the commercial district in the Hamlet to an MUH mixed-use Hamlet district for which proposed new MUH code would uniquely apply. So that is the purple area that you see there in that small part of the town map. This is another representation. This may have been used in the comprehensive plan. So we are proposing to rezone the current red-orange commercial district to mixed-use Hamlet. We do not propose to rezone additional residential districts that sometimes are considered to be part of the Rush Hamlet area. That's the larger dotted line. But I'll make mention of some issues with that a bit later on. So there's a but that goes along with that. But at this point, we're talking just about rezoning the current commercial zone to mixed use in. At the same time, we propose rezoning the residential mobile home RMH district in Western Rush. So if you see the gray area to the right of the tan area in that picture, that's this little area right here. That's the only residential mobile home district that we have. It's never been used, but the reason we are recommending rezoning it to R20 is simply to free up that code section 120-10 in the zoning code article 2, which has all the district regulations. Surely there's other ways to do that, but that is the cleanest way to do it. We feel gets rid of the district that we're not using, and that's the MUH be fit in a nice important location, right with all the other district codes. So that RMH zoning code, if you read it, it mostly says, look at town code chapter 77, mobile home parks. That's where all the meat is. That could remain for future use. If there's any possibility of ever going back to rezoning something to residential mobile home. But otherwise, it's rather straightforward to rezone that to R20 because the residential mobile home code says, in addition to mobile homes, all uses allowed in R20. So it already is like R20 minus the mobile homes. And if you see that, notice the diagram up there, essentially it's a little area carved right out of a R20 district. So it kind of is just natural to make that R20. If there's no other reasons that anybody knows of not to do so.
If I could interject and maybe Dan, because you've been around a long time, and Jerry and Jean. I remember when that first came up, and Robert, maybe you can clarify or not. Is there something in New York State that required you to have an RMH district? Because there was a lot of
I heard that.
there was a lot of upsetness in the town. And that's what I recall them saying, that there had to be.
Yeah, the state said we have to have this, so we're gonna have it here. But I
That's
remember hearing that.
that's my recollection as well.
I don't know offhand if that's required. I can't say that I've seen it in every town.
You know,
But I'll look into that. and make
Because there
sure.
was a lot of pushback about it.
Yeah,
And it's like they found a spot where maybe it would be
Maybe wouldn't bother
the,
anybody.
right.
But isn't that area that currently being subdivided and houses being built over there?
Right, but it's currently zoned
No.
for that.
Yes,
right?
but moving out of RMH seems the proper thing to do when there's no mobile homes there. It's,
Right, but then you're gonna go put
Single-family
it
homes.
somewhere else, potentially.
oh, do we have to put it
Well,
somewhere?
that's
that's the
what-
question.
that's
So
the question.
I'll look into
That-
it.
Okay, got it.
That's my recollection,
Okay.
Jean, why something, again, I wasn't on the town board at the time. But I know there was a large group of citizens very upset that this had to take place. And whatever, when this took place, it had to be
Yeah.
90s?
Can we just eliminate it then?
Early
if it-
90s.
Right.
So Robert will find out.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a look to make sure, well, to see if it is New York state law to have a section like this or a zone like this in your town. And I'll report back.
And I
Okay.
think also it'd be interesting with the changes that the governor in Albany is proposing for housing and things like that, because what you don't want to do, in my opinion, as a board, we don't want to remove something to then go have to put it somewhere else, and then you're gonna get those neighbors upset.
Only that would be.
Versus this has been known for 30 years at least, that mobile homes could go.
Yeah.
Right. Doesn't look like the section of town code or even the mobile home section outwardly reference, as required by New York state law XYZ. But we will double check.
Okay,
Oh, it's a very good point. Actually, John Morelli was around long enough to raise that same point, although he was very much in favor and suggested this method. But that's really important to figure out. So, and as I said, you could do it other ways, like for again, tier 3 law, we ended up with 120/64.1. I mean, you could do that and tag it on to some other zone, but this is just so much cleaner.
Which is still not been changed in the actual code. It
Right,
still says
right.
173.
And frankly, there's other code sections we don't use. We don't use industrial. We don't use restricted business. It's just that those two are more likely to be used, I think, than mobile home. Okay, so we came up with a unique mixed use hamlet code. And how did we do that? If you look at the hamlet, of course, conventional single family dwellings are apparent, commercial businesses are apparent, government uses are apparent. What's not so apparent is some of the mixed uses and all of the apartments that we learned about. So building inspector Limbeck surveyed, I counted, John, 24 properties. That's pretty impressive. In the hamlet on East Henrietta Road and Park Lane, and that survey did show the diversity of small commercial and varied residential uses with many apartments. I think it surprised me how many apartments there were. We benchmarked mixed use codes in many other towns in Monroe County, Ontario and Livingston counties, notably Avon, Canandaigua, Canisius, Henrietta, Livonia, Penfield, and Greece all have versions of mixed use hamlets. They don't call them hamlets, but mixed use. So Rush is not all unusual in having an older and de facto mixed use so-called downtown. We like Penfield's code the best. It seemed to be the best fit, and it was used as our starting point. And we modified it from there. So we did talk about a mixed use overlay, and early in the game, people were thinking that that might be a viable way to go. We did consider it, and what we found out was the overlay method was not recommended by the comprehensive plan consultant, the one consultant we had available to use. Of the 3 county benchmarking that we did, only Canandaigua used an overlay method, and it was horrendous. It required an initiation by each lot owner who wanted to participate in the overlay and do something different than the primary code. It had to be in a designated so-called growth node area and required all the town board and planning board steps of our solar tier 3. So it had all those steps back and forth between the town board and planning board to go through. And it was, in my opinion, not very practical for each property as Canandaigua was doing it. So it appeared nearly unworkable and would take, I think each resident a year or so if they did make a request and tried to get approval for it. The standalone mixed use district, much more common, and can be once and done. Since our mixed use hamlet district includes commercial uses in what was a commercial only district, it should be viewed as status quo by the business owners primarily, and as a huge benefit to residential use owners. Okay, next. So these come primarily out of Penfield's code. We did shorten them a bit, consolidate them. The whole overall purpose sounds rather flowery, but it does capture what we're attempting to do. The purpose of the mixed-use hamlet district is permit creation and construction of mixed-use developments while maintaining the unique historic qualities and characteristics of the town's hamlet area. All development must comply with the following principles of mixed-use development: a mixture of complementary residential, commercial, government/civic, and recreational land uses to create economic and social vitality, and to encourage the linking of pedestrian and vehicle trips, flexible housing alternatives, areas that are safe, comfortable, and convenient for the residents and visitors with flexibility for compact and efficient land use, walkability within neighborhoods with walkways and trails that encourage pedestrian and bicycle travel, and public transit. I don't know how you get public transit down here, but certainly we have a Lehigh Trail going through. That's one thing we've got going for us, and the possibility of other public spaces. Open space preservation and reduction of impact on natural resources that has to do with being compact, obviously, and recognition and endorsement of reasonable pre-existing mixed uses. The very practical one at the end. So again, two primary goals: accommodation and flexibility. Acknowledge and generally permit what is already in the hamlet. We really had no agenda to reform or modify what already exists here, while maintaining a reasonable level of control by giving the planning board the authority to decide what is appropriate for new developments based both on code suggestions or suggestions in the code and consistency with what exists on nearby properties, while attempting to retain customer requirements for existing and potential new commercial developments, such as the former Big M property, somewhat like commercial district requirements. Interestingly, just today, we learned about another potential development, of property just to the north of the former Big M lot. And I didn't see that one coming, but that's another example of a substantial potential commercial development that you want to have some control over. It's a very visible spot and going to be important to the town. Residential use flexibility was a big part of our proposal. So it allows residential uses like the current R20, one single family dwelling or one two-family dwelling, or residential uses like RMD, multiple dwellings, one or more multiple family dwellings. And by the way, a multiple family dwelling is defined in the code as 3 or more dwelling units per building. It is not two family, it is 3 or more. Or totally new residential uses, what we call vertical mixed use, permitted commercial uses, and also residential in the same building on the top, meaning the second floor, side or rear of the building. And then more than one building with residences not to exceed 2 residences or commercial buildings per lot. We felt we ought to draw the line somewhere. There are some with 2 buildings, and this does not include accessory structures like sheds and a tent. It's those 2 primary buildings. There are residential dwelling square foot minimums, so we did not ignore those, but those, and I'll show you later on in one of the examples, but they're set at the smallest similar sizes typically in the code, such as if you're talking about a single family dwelling, it's the R20 minimum of 1,000 square feet. If you're talking about apartment, the smallest reference to, or the smallest reference given in the town code for an apartment is 400 square feet. That's the minimum of the range for accessory apartments of an update we just approved earlier this year. So 1,000 square foot single family and 400 square foot apartments. And for commercial and public use flexibility, commercial and residential on the same lot in the same building, as we said, it's a long list of specific permitted uses similar to commercial district proposal, with a few exceptions, all of which require a site plan. Not just the exceptions require a site plan, but all of the uses require a site plan if they're new. Includes public buildings, recreation, community services, and civic uses such as churches, schools, community centers, and other public-oriented uses. I'm sure you can include firehouses in that. The list of specific uses is similar to commercial district proposal that requires special permits, including outdoor events. And we said, other than customary town events, such as the Fireman's Carnival, Parade and Fireworks, and the Rush Ball Festival, which we propose to be permitted as currently done, which is essentially by the fire marshal. So we're not interested in having the planning board get involved with approving or planning for those town events. That can be handled the way it is according to the way we wrote up the proposal. Dimensional accommodation and flexibility. Dimensional having to do with lot width, lot depth, lot size, front setback, side and rear setbacks, all those types of things. Those customary lot sizes and setbacks are often not met in the hamlet, so the proposal tries to maintain some control but prevent the need for ongoing future area variances that add no value. It uses wording such as the planning board shall have the power to establish, determine, and modify applicable provisions of the mixed-use hamlet district with regard to setbacks for the purpose of enabling and encouraging flexibility of design. Setbacks shall be consistent with existing, adjacent, and nearby buildings and lots. Now, I will mention later in this presentation that there is wording like this to provide flexibility with the essentially agreement of the planning board. So I think there's a special need here for the town attorneys to look over that type of language. Generally, we didn't make it up, but we copied it from some other town. But I think there's a special need for the town attorney to look over that type of thing to make sure it's reasonable in terms of the intent and the wording, and is not gonna get us into any trouble later on. We're not much trouble.
We're on it.
We're on. We recognize, what we're doing something different here, so we look forward to the help of the town attorneys. Off-street parking accommodation and flexibility similar, since parking space may be limited, maintain some control, but prevent the need for variances that add no value with wording such as all elements of parking shall be part of the site plan approved by the planning board and shall follow code requirements for off-street parking to the greatest extent possible as determined by the planning board. You notice everything says as determined by the planning board. You can't say just leave it without that statement because the applicants may come back and say, well, that's the way it is. So in the end run, it always has to say as determined by the planning board. However, adjoining properties may combine off-street parking areas. The town attorney must review and approve legal cross easement, utility easements, and maintenance agreements. That pretty much comes out of Avon's village code. Avon is very big on shared parking and paving from one lot right to the next in their village because there's so little extra room. More goals, maintaining a reasonable level of control includes, so it does include architectural and landscaping expectations similar to new limited industrial and commercial proposals, but without the 1% building cost requirement for landscaping. The reason I would say that it's unlikely the planning board would ever want to get into and would not include that in residential districts. It's certainly not for single family residences, maybe for 2-family or townhouse type things. But this is a recognition that you still can have substantial commercial development in town as we see it's coming out potentially. So you still want some handle to make things look nice in the downtown, as well as maintain the historic character of the buildings that we do have. We added hours of operation and noise limitations, given the close proximity of commercial and residential uses. Some of those noise limitations come right out of other locations in the Rushtown Code or where they come out of other town codes. And then again, encouragement of connectivity and pedestrian access to public open space, which is kind of hard to know what that would show up as, but at least the principle is there. We also strive to prevent abuse of flexibility provided to new developments, which do not require that flexibility. A primary example is the former Big M lot, for which we should require reasonable setbacks and landscaping. And I would add now the property just to the north of that was at 6930 Western Road, I think.
59.
Or you want to think about the possibility that anybody could come and purchase one or more lots that currently have reasonable setbacks for the purpose of new buildings with greatly reduced setbacks or build out to the front. So you want to maintain some sort of control and not give up what looks good now with what you have, just because you provided flexibility for those things with lower setbacks. Or the purchase of a lot in a row of single family residences for the purpose of commercial use. But I will add that could occur right now. Right? Any of those single family residents out there in a row, which look pretty nice, could be bought out and has to be converted to a commercial business. So that's why we use the following wording, if I can read it from here. Removal of existing buildings and or combining lots shall not be used to reduce previously existing setbacks, which unless deemed appropriate by the planning board, that magical word again. The dimensional requirement flexibility shall not be used in a way that will degrade appearance and safety on those lots which have adequate space. Building and parking lot setbacks should approximate requirements in other districts on lots where the planning board deems such setbacks are appropriate. So again, that should be subject to attorney scrutiny, but that's the general intent. Commercial building sizes are restricted to maintain the character of the hamlet. We said no structure shall be larger than 10,000 gross square feet, unless a smaller area is deemed appropriate by the planning board. So as it turns out, the proposal for 6930 Western Inn Road, just to the north of Big M lot, is just about 10,000 gross square feet. I think it's like 10,600 or something like that. So we came pretty close to nailing what a big building would look like in the hamlet. And again, this is my comment, content, intent, and specifics of wording should be scrutinized by our town attorneys. We realize that this is unusual, even though we tend to borrow it from other towns. Mentioned this previously, creation of a new mixed-use hamlet district requires consideration of other code tables that have dimensional requirements that go across all districts. So there are several code sections must be updated with MUH requirements in quotation marks, because some of the requirements, as you'll see, are not requirements at all. Some of which are very specific and some that are not applicable, given the flexibility stated in the MUH code. Be aware, and I put it in red, that we included fixes for other glaring errors and omissions on these tables to avoid changing those again later with residential updates. So again, you guys control what's done here, but these are the recommendations that we're making to go beyond the MUH. These are the code tables: size of buildings, minimum area and dimensions of lots or subdivided premises, minimum front setbacks and maximum finished structures, minimum side and rear setbacks, maximum coverage, and required off-street parking. We'll go through some extremes of what those tables look like. This is the one with building size, and you probably can't read it. It's extremely deficient. For example, for R20, I believe it had minimum size of 1,000 square feet. Just for a single building. It made no mention of two-family dwellings, even though those are allowed with special permit in R20. So theoretically, a two-family dwelling could have been built that each was 500 square feet. Or one could be 400 square feet and one 600 square feet. That is not what's typical of other towns, and I doubt if it was the intent of the people who wrote the code originally. So where that existed, we tended to go in and find the most applicable, smallest building size that we could relate to that. So I think in the case of R20 two-family, we said something like 750 square feet, which is the requirement for a multi-family dwelling for each resident, each dwelling. So we applied that philosophy through the whole thing. We cleared up the fact that there's no two-family for R30 sizes. A lot of the other ones were missing. Multi-family zones allow single family and two family, and those weren't specified. So essentially we went through, cleaned up all the things that were missing in residential that I'm pretty sure we'd come to when we get to residential, which we'll talk about a bit later. And you can read them at your leisure, they're all there. When it comes to mixed use hamlet, we wanted to be as flexible as possible. So we got into things like average size of apartments with none less than 400 square feet, that type of thing, rather than specifying each specific apartment. This one is the other extreme. It is minimum side and rear setbacks. And you see kind of at the lower midsection there, we added an MUH, and it just has quadruple asterisks. And the asterisks say something like refer to the town code section, because there is no minimum specified. It says that that's one of those things where the planning board has discretion and can make it similar to other districts if there's space, or allow something that's very, very small. So those kind of represent the two extremes. This is another one you probably want to think about, and I'll tell you why. This is off-street parking requirements. For multiple dwellings, which I have up there, it's not a change, but multiple dwellings, it says that you have to have 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit, and one of those has to be an enclosed garage. That's what it says. So if somebody built townhouses in Rush, they would have to include garages with it. And I've seen developments in other towns that do just that. For one family dwellings, it said 1 parking space. If you can imagine that. This is something that the long ago Citizens Committee had a list of things. Many of them were agricultural for improvement. This was one they also included. It makes no sense to specify the parking spaces we have and require only one for a one-family dwelling. So we upped that to 2, and we included the idea that one should be in a closed garage. For two family, there was no specification whatsoever. So we added that. Also 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit, 1 in an enclosed garage. And again, these all would apply to any new buildings. Anything that's currently existing would have that level of requirement. And the other one is MUH. It says 2 spaces per unit, but doesn't require a garage.
Scott, can I just ask clarification on your one family dwelling that's in black on the left? Then under, to the
Yeah.
right,
I couldn't get that to
on,
put a line through it.
okay,
It's
so,
not 12, it's 1 crossed out with a 2.
right, but the two's crossed off as well.
Oh, boy.
So that's why I just wanted to make sure. I heard you say you changed it from
Yeah.
1 to 2. I just wanted to make sure that it's
These-
2.
These tables, when they put them into my Word, sometimes they're uncontrollable.
Oh, no, I get it.
And
I just,
couldn't- and I didn't realize they were both crossed out. I thought they were both not crossed out. So the right thing is to have the 1 crossed out and have it in black and have the 2 in red,
in red,
not
okay,
crossed out.
all right.
Yeah, I just couldn't.
That's what I heard you say.
I
just
couldn't
wanted
get
to
that
clarify.
right, yeah. Good clarification. I didn't even see the problem here.
Well, it's pretty small.
So again, you guys determine what, if anything, gets approved, and you need to be thinking about the idea of, I think the parking spaces are totally reasonable, but the idea of enclosed garage is not something we had before, except for multiple dwelling units. Okay, any other comments and questions for me, because I've got some more for you. Okay, well, again, obviously you're free to ask any more, but I've got more slides. First of all, recognition of the code committee. This is just a regurgitation of what our timelines were, what our actual performance was. April 12th was when the town board approved the proposal for establishment of the code committee. And as part of the deliverables of the letter we put together, it stated the 2 goals that are there. The first one was limited industrial and commercial code proposals would be available by September 30, 2023. Actual, we provided the limited industrial proposal to the town board way back on June 14th, a few months early. We didn't get to present that to you folks until a month ago. The C code proposal wasn't made until October 29, a month late with the presentation today. On the other hand, the Hamlet code was, we said would have available on March 1, 2024. Put that up earlier and put it on the same timeline with commercial, which is the code that it's replacing in the Hamlet at least. And we delivered that Hamlet proposal at the same timeline as commercial, 4 months earlier than our proposed timeline. So we grouped the proposals differently, but overall we beat our plan schedule. Now, our plan is a residential, all of the residential areas are up next, since committee members seem to still be willing. And that's what we'll work on next, but next slide. We've got some big questions on that. I could use your guidance, a number of potentially contentious issues. The current code has a number of code shortfalls that should be fixed, such as we have no code around flag lots and how you deal with those. We have no regulations on 2-family dwellings and how you deal with those. It says they're allowed, but there's just no comparison between a 2-family dwelling and the very substantial code for an accessory apartment. Right? You can't reconcile the lack of code on one and the substantial code on the other. Most towns do have code sections devoted to 2-family dwellings. And then there's a dozen other various things that we need to clean up in addition to clarifications. But here's where I could use your advice, and I'm putting quotation marks here, that red statement: large and potentially more contentious issues such as minor home occupations that you're aware of, we now call accessory uses, and possibly the permission or permitting so-called major home occupations like Mendon does, restricted to potentially large lots. I think we all recognize some people have businesses at home that probably shouldn't be allowed. some have businesses at home that maybe have an employee or two and they're on lots where it really doesn't make any difference and it's not bothering anybody. Maybe we can formalize that and be more flexible for our residents. Short-term rental, Airbnb and Vrbo regulations, we have none. We did state in the MUH that those things are allowed in the hamlet, but we have no code on them. There are at least 2 Airbnb units now being advertised in Rush. You can go on Airbnb and type in Rush, New York, and they will come out. They look classy, they get great reviews. One of them is particularly unusual as a glamping site. But they all get 4.8, 4.9, 5 out of 5 rating. So the owners are doing a good job, but they're totally unregulated by us.
Do most towns, have most towns incorporated?
I would say most I would say the best towns do. It's
Oh.
interesting, the benchmark that is advertised in the magazine we get monthly on
Yeah.
the town
Yeah,
had a review of those, right? What the risks are if you don't have them and what the risks are if you don't write the code the right way. The benchmark is Kinesis. No, not Kinesis. What's the small finger lake? The one that's undeveloped, not Kinesis. It starts with, I think it also starts with a C. Canadice, thank you. It's next to Hemlock. Canadice town of Canadice is used as the benchmark, best example in New York. And it's
In New
ancient
York.
law,
interesting.
but it's very well done. So we would essentially copy that and maybe abbreviate just a bit if we had an interest to do that. You would like us to do that.
Those kinds of codes are very common in the Finger Lakes area in particular.
Yeah, yeah.
We have what I call valued substantial businesses like Rush Gravel and Burn Balance Septic. They are both classy businesses who do an excellent job in disturbing no one. And residents get a lot of value from having both of those. But I don't know how they're permitted, frankly. Certainly gravel pits are permitted, but Rush doesn't advertise
I know.
themselves, despite their name, as a gravel pit. They advertise themselves as a landscape supply business, which they are. I have no interest in doing anything but helping them. Okay, but my point is, would you like us to come up with proposals to permit what reasonably should be permitted so that it's not one of these here no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, which is what we tend to do now.
Should be some sort of regulation.
Excuse me?
Should be some sort of regulation, just.
Yeah,
But I have
well,
things-
for example, I'm thinking we could be more specific in the gravel mining section that says, accessory business aligned with that, like trucking, like sale of other bulk products could be allowed with a special permit. If you have 75 acres, you know, put some requirements on it that not every Tom, Dick and Harry can go start a landscaping business. But that's what I'm thinking. And burn balance, again, I don't know how it's permitted, but they always have their trucks inside, the place is immaculate. I could visualize something that says something that's a special requirement or special needs for the citizens of Rush, or in this case, of course, have no sewers whatsoever, other than septic systems. Anyway, so there may be ways to handle that. That would have a large impact of our attorneys as well. A large input from our attorneys, but I would like to see some way that they're not overlooked and but yet are allowed, and without allowing other people, other business startups to abuse this the thing. And there's firearm ranges like Rochester Brooks, which may be a not-for-profit, I don't know, a public club. And then Monroe County, which I think John has said they probably have higher authority than the town of Rush does, but it would be good to know how those are authorized and kind of why they do what they do, can do what they do and make it known and obvious, so that we don't have other people thinking they can start up rifle ranges.
Well, don't we have one now that's proposed,
We had one that was in business,
Sorza?
and of course, the first comments were, well, how come they can do it? And then there's something I'll get into more detail, non-conforming residential uses in R20 and R30 that are adjacent to other districts that are more forgiving, like our the proposed mixed-use hamlet and our multiple dwelling districts. That if the districts were extended a bit, might be able to include those and let them do what they've been doing for who knows how long. I can show you an example of that. So this is back to that Rush Hamlet slide, and I put the arrow at the bottom where you see that those lots right across East China Road from the mixed-use hamlet or the darker brown multiple dwelling district. There's some potential in real uses that are more aligned with the mixed-use hamlet or the multiple dwelling. So if we go to the next slide. Catholic Church, 6105 Rush Henrietta, Rush Lima Road. Catholic Church, I understand the latest proposal is if somebody wants to buy it, to continue use as a church, but there was some talk about converting it to apartments. And that kind of thing is always possible in the future for any of our smaller churches. They're just across the street from those more flexible zones. So if that strip were zoned differently somehow, that would allow for more flexibility for development in the future. So something at least to think about. But let me go one more example. There is this property right now, which is 61, I think it's 41 behind that. Rush Lima Road. It is across from the multiple dwelling district. Just east of Shiloh Church. It's in R30.
By the way, the Shiloh Church has a for sale sign out
I
there.
thought I saw that today.
Yeah,
So the same thing applies to the Shiloh Church. That could be go for apartments, for example, but not where it's zoned now in R30. But in R30 permits at most 1 2-family dwelling, but there on that particular lot, there appears to be 2 buildings with totaling over 5,000 square feet, 2 driveways, and it looks like multiple apartments in each of the 2 buildings. It's right across the road from RMD, so you could ask yourself, how did that come about? But what do you do about it now? Next slide. This is not a bad looking property. That's Shiloh Church on the right and the property I'm talking about on the left. I think there's an extension on the back of the main, what used to be the single family residence there that probably has more apartments. The building to the left is what perhaps was a barn in the back, which now probably is apartments. It's not a bad looking place. It's laid out nicely where it is. Would we want to go after these people? I think it makes more sense to say, yeah, where it's located, it's not a bad use, and should we move the zoning line a little bit? Anyway, I'm not asking you what should be done specifically, but do you want us to go after these more contentious issues as part of our residential work?
When you say contentious, are you? I saw this as under the MUH, extending that line versus, is that what you're trying to marry
Well,
those two?
not now.
Oh, okay.
Okay, not now. So my proposal is we will look at all the residential district issues, right? Since these are in R20 or R30, it becomes a part of our residential work. The solution may be to modify the zoning districts to accommodate them. But I'm not saying we should do that now. We haven't studied because we don't know what else is out there.
Oh.
There's boundaries all around those districts, and maybe there's other things next to them elsewhere.
so those properties that we're looking at are within this dotted line, which kind of an unofficial
Let me see.
boundary of the hamlet?
They are, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're right here.
At the same time, so maybe this line makes sense to move the boundary. I certainly wouldn't recommend it for this or this, which are clearly residential.
Right.
So
And
Or these?
that boundary line, again, is nothing that is designated by the town. It's what I think we talked about.
just
It
like-
showed up in the comprehensive
Yeah.
plan with Labella. It's
Yes.
nothing that's an official.
It was
Hamlet
kind of like the charrette. Use that,
Okay.
it's kind of been I think like an unofficial thought process.
The
that has
comprehensive
developed.
plan people went over that, and over that, and over that.
Right.
It's- I got, apparently that's what we ended up with. But
Yeah.
There was no,
But this
Right.
proposal would
wasn't
put
set in
boundaries
stone.
on the.
I mean, it
It's
doesn't
gonna be the hamlet.
exclude anything. I mean, it's kind of like a natural,
Yeah, so.
but we have these potential properties down here, and I know this is for later on, but you know, that may be better suited or could be suitable for a multiple dwelling
Mhm.
kind of a situation here and here, but right now it's R30.
I think you probably could make a case to move the boundary along that lower line.
Right, I mean, the
because-
road go right on the other side of the road, it's,
Because then you have both sides of the same road having the same zoning district, and the same flexibility. And then any properties behind that are further back and they rightly should be R30, right?
right,
But along the road, maybe it makes sense to move the boundary by one lot along the road. But I wouldn't entertain the big changes up above, at the northern side.
Right.
Unless they got new information.
Right, and I think we kind of had a little bit of that discussion at some point months ago, when we were trying to, should
Yeah.
we designate that, what these boundaries were? And we never, because we knew the code committee was being formed and.
One of the things that this is gonna do is allow us to enforce and to set things up a lot clearer up front without. Like right now, can I allow an accessory structure in a residential zone if there's not a house on there already? We get that every other week. And we're working off two definitions right now, rather than a specific code section that says thou shalt or thou shan't.
That's a good example of the type of cleanup we want to do.
And
And again, other towns state very specifically, there shall be no buildings on a lot unless without a primary residence. And they stated that specifically, that clearly.
And it's also when people are buying property, it is clearly.
Yeah.
We have a map now.
Right, and in my exception to that accessory, if it's agricultural, then we'll let them do that. We've
So I
already
think-
made that
I
change.
think if you go, there might be one or two more slides to wrap up. I think there's one more, yeah. So again, does the town board want the code committee to propose justifiable resolutions to some of these both large and potentially more contentious issues in residential districts? And I think that would allow us to get to the point where we can have a new era of enforcement. Right now, there's a lot of things nobody feels good about enforcing. Because it's hard to say, why do you enforce this one and not this one? In my view, you want to get to the point where you enforce everything that doesn't meet the code, but feel good about it because the code's clearly laid out, and doesn't penalize anybody unreasonably.
Is there another one?
I think that's one more, that's all for now. Oh, there is another one, I'm sorry. I warned you about this already too. Would the town board be willing to appoint a formal liaison to the code committee? Now, Gene's been doing this, I think, informally. But we have a formally designated liaison, so we have one person for communications in both directions when we're not at these kinds of meetings. We don't need that person to attend our meetings unless they really wanted to. Another question for you, but as a final summary here, we envision our highest priority topics, which were mentioned in that April resolution. They'll be wrapped up this winter when we do all the residentials. So we will have done commercial, we will have done limited industrial, we will have done the hamlet, we will have done all the residentials. We hope to wrap those all up this winter. I would knock it off for the summer. Frankly, it's a major impact on my summer life. But we would be willing, potentially, we would consider starting up again in the fall of 2024, because there's still more out there. Our site plan requirements are not optimum, our special permit requirements are not optimum, clearly stated. There's a number of issues out there that we'd like to clean up. But these aren't the same significance as these districts.
I'm in favor with all those.
You have nothing to lose because you can all of us say no.
Well, I was gonna say as a lame duck, it appears to me, because I'm still a resident and I continue to be a resident, I hope. If we don't continue with this momentum, there are chances that in the future, someone with different interests will develop plans that have to be used in the future rather than what this code committee could do.
I think the biggest risk is you just lose all momentum and you never get more improvements anywhere near this substance of what we're doing right now. It's just
So-
an unusual set of circumstances.
I'm a big favor of the comprehensive plan, never collecting dust. And I'm also in big favor of the code committee going on and taking care of all of these other issues. Maybe we don't see them every day, but they're still there and they should be taken care of. I'm in favor of
You can go.
going forth.
The tough part right now is gonna fall on the town board because you guys have to hold the public hearings and get these voted in. And that takes a little bit of time, but we've gotta, that's part of the momentum, you know, to start implementing some of these things too.
You know, the limited industrial is, you know, coming together. It's just about there to be approved.
Right. I think the comments we got at your public hearing, you know, like Scott said, he adjusted, you know. we
Yeah,
talked
there's some
about it.
adjustments, which I think are minor and wouldn't require, I'll leave that up to the attorneys. You know, and Scott can tell you what they are.
And I'll have to talk to David and Scott.
And Dave, yeah, about, you know, whether we can move forward with adopting those changes without another public hearing. I don't know. You'll tell us if we can, right?
One of the biggest
Yes.
issues was the
That, I agree. I said,
commercial
yeah.
that you could have.
What was that, Dan?
I thought they were minor-ish.
I thought they were very minor as well.
And-
Specifically, it's, the only thing I recommended was, and the rest of the co-committee agreed later on, was changing the 25% lot coverage for commercial limited industrial for building and 50% maximum for building plus hardscape. And you can get a little bit more lenient going to 30 and 65. Instead
Yeah.
of 25, 50. And in fact,
That's it.
you could argue it's moving in the direction of the current code. And it's a minor change to what we proposed.
Yeah, I'll discuss with David and
Yeah.
Right, because
'Cause
we do have it on the agenda for Wednesday night,
And we did get the
239M.
239M back from Monroe
Okay,
County.
good. Okay, good. Yeah, we'll have an answer for you. before
Okay,
then.
And it said almost nothing, right?
yeah.
Right,
But
Yeah, they
again,
didn't have any comment.
We still have a shot at Ferguson Electric if we keep it moving.
Well, that's
550.
we realize that, and I think everybody here realizes that.
Yep.
You know, and everything you're doing here, you know, within the mixed use, you know, I'm really curious to see, you know, once you our attorneys have a chance to look at everything that's proposed to make sure the language is appropriate and stuff like that, so that we can take the next step. Because again, we have somebody now, again, this thing's happening all of a sudden, and we don't want to halt it.
Yeah, so this
We don't know how to what?
Long time.
I know, but we're here now,
Yeah.
and
Get it done.
exactly.
Yeah.
Everything that you have done, proposed, has been right in line with the recommendations in the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
And I think it's great. I'm really very, very pleased with that, that we're making some progress to enable
Yeah.
these uses that'll benefit the town and still have all the protections in there so that we're not doing a free-for-all kind of with no plan. But you'll tell us
Yeah, so we
when
have
we
a
can do
few,
that.
I think, sort of larger issues to check the box first for, which would be the, you know, the mobile home district.
Yeah.
And
My
then-
understanding is that based on information that came to me, is that you don't have to have a mobile home zone. But you can't exclude it. Kind of,
Well,
and I'll let you,
yeah, well, I'll take
go
a
through
look
that,
and get
yeah.
a formal answer. As I said, my initial reaction was I haven't seen that in every town, if that was a New York State requirement, you'd see every town who would have.
Right. right.
Yeah, where's Pittsford's?
Yeah.
I know where Limas is.
And there
Yeah.
is, but-
Yeah, Lin-
Pittsburgh's is on Linden Avenue.
yeah,
Oh, they have one.
it's Pittsford has it
Interesting.
in Linden Avenue,
Linden Avenue.
yeah,
That's it.
Yeah.
So maybe, but
right across from Linden Oaks.
Yeah.
That's
Just up the
Pittsburgh.
road. Yeah.
Yeah, I drive by it every
Oh,
day.
yeah.
No, I know. I thought that was,
It's not Penfield, it's Pittsburgh.
I thought
is
it
it
was still Brighton over there. No,
No, it's,
interesting. I didn't realize that was part of it.
that's where Glazer started. It owns the
Yeah.
Tampa Bay Bucks now. That was his development.
so that one, and then the other issue that Scott was getting at was the lack of setbacks slash can the planning board, de facto setback requirements. Those are sort of two bigger issues we'll have to look at first, because if the answer to one of those is you needed a mobile home district or you need setback requirements, then I think there's a bigger changes than that might require us to discuss again. But if not, those are the answers that we hope for, which is, you don't have to have a mobile home district, and planning board can have this discretion to set.
Well, I don't,
Setbacks.
even,
Then we can put it
even
right
if
in the
you do
final
or you
form.
don't, I don't, having that designated district is not a breaking for the work that they've done, if we have to keep that in there, if we don't have to keep it in there.
It would,
Right.
it would affect numbering more than.
Yeah.
Right,
that's
all right,
what
it doesn't, that's not like the setbacks and everything else.
Correct, yeah.
That I was looking
But
at.
before, I would say those answers have to come before we put it into the final
Sure.
form for a public hearing or something like that. But those are pretty simple, I think, maybe the setback's a little more complicated, but the mobile home should be a pretty straightforward answer. And then we can put it into final form and get a public hearing scheduled and keep the momentum going.
That'd be great.
And
Okay, so we'll take the broader picture of residential and try to come up with a bullet point for some of the stickier issues as well. Like I said, you got nothing to lose, because all you can say, no, we're not gonna do that, or not like it.
well,
And
again,
how
you're,
difficult
you're,
would it
you're
be?
doing the work. I mean, we can't thank you enough.
Yeah, I know.
Because
I
we
know.
tried, and then you came up with this proposal.
Yeah, it's
and
it's
thank you.
beyond what most
Yeah.
people would do. Thank you so much. How difficult would it be, should the board decide to add more, on the other side, the south side of Rush Lima Road there to be in that multiple dwelling RMD, right there where that blue arrow is? I mean, the town board can rezone.
You would just make the red district that much bigger.
Well,
And
The red?
and the-
No,
The brown.
the darker brown, the MD.
And
Right.
you
The
have,
RMD.
you have to realize the house to the left of St. Joe's previous town boards have rezoned it twice, because I was on the zoning board at the time, that went from whatever it is, R20 to, was it commercial, and then back to R20? Yeah. That little white house to the left of it, it's been rezoned by a previous town boards twice.
So obviously you can rezone it again.
Right,
every
that's-
time. Answer that question.
Well, and doing any of those proposals, I don't think you call it spot zoning, because it's really moving the whole line.
Right. it's like-
The hard
just
part is-
making it-
Is determining, where you draw the line.
Right.
I mean, and that's not something that we can answer for you, but if you tell us where you want the line to be, we'll make it happen.
Okay.
You like your flash drive back?
Nice job.
Yes. Again, can't thank you enough, both of you gentlemen and the others on the committee.
No matter what I do, it comes out to wait that. Thank you.
You have a question and answers for 15 minutes.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, John.
Yep.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm gonna say, it doesn't need to be said, but In 23 years of serving the town, I have never seen two more worthwhile projects than the Code Committee and the Comprehensive Plan Committee come to fruition like we're witnessing. And what it does for me, for my way of thinking, is it ensures the town will listen to residents, and the town will ultimately in the future end up where the residents want it. And that is extremely important to me. So, having said that, because I'm a lame duck, we're gonna have some discussion from the informational meeting on November 1st. Amendments to a lease with a horse's friend. And I'm gonna guess that Deputy Supervisor Corbin would
No.
like to lead that off.
No, go right ahead, Supervisor. I just thought I didn't know what to expect from that meeting. I'm glad we as a board decided that we needed to have an informational meeting to get the information out, but I also think that there was information that we as a board did not emphasize or did not state clearly that we as a board, based on our town attorney's legal advice, we have followed all protocol, all process to the letter of the law. And that property is deeded as park, recreation, and ancillary uses. And that the use of that property through a lease with the horse's friend is a permitted recreation, park, and ancillary use. And I know between the three presentations and the questions, I got a lot of phone calls and emails saying, but what about this? But what about this? Somebody said this, somebody said that, and we as a board really did not come out with an answer or a reply. Dan?
I think we need to have David stand up and say, we did this, the board did this, it's all legal for these reasons. Get over it. I mean, they don't believe us,
I agree.
so at least the attorney is an attorney. And I think that's what needs to happen, because
I had that very pretty much that very same phrase, Dan, written in that document that David and I put together. I shared it with you. He wanted two things changed in the document, recall that one? And I had written that in there, and David asked me to take it out. So, he probably wasn't listening to the board request as much as he was listening to my request to put it in there. But I agree, it should be in there, because we've got people going around pantomiming as attorneys when they aren't attorneys.
That we did not follow proper process, as well as I had a phone call this morning, again saying, Amber, did the parcels, pastures, did anything change? And I said, nothing changed except barn 7 was put in there because of the grant. The south pasture field was always in there. And they said, well, that they don't believe you. And so we as a board, I just don't know how we get people to see the facts that we have gone through since 2020. And this has gone through 3 different boards from 2020, 2021 was a different board, and then 2022, the current board that's here.
Plus multiple threats of parkland alienation.
Right. So,
And yet what we've done, or what is there, it is completely legal permitted use of that land under the deed.
And we haven't done anything that I haven't cleared with David. And I'm sure David chats with Robert.
Yeah, so do you need David to? Should we put it on an agenda item and ask David to stand up and? You know, voice his
I
approval?
think as we move ahead, and go through. Modify the agreement again. I mean, if we have to go through all the steps. And then. Have David explain it.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, he'd be happy to do it.
I think that's the only way it's. It's never gonna. Settle, but.
Right.
At least it'll look like we're in the right,
Which,
because right now we're being bad.
right, and we are,
But we've clarified it every single time,
and we've published the
every single
information.
time.
I know.
Mhm. So, I agree. It is on the agenda for Wednesday night for further discussion. I asked Jerry to put it on for the workshop so that we can see how we wanted to move forward, because again, we did our due diligence. We presented the information, we got public input, we've had presentations all the way back to 2020 on a horse's friend at that property. And we are trying to follow proper procedure and make sure people understand that, but for some reason, even though we did our presentation and showed, what's that?
Nothing.
Even though we showed the facts, it is still, it's not accepting the facts. So it's a struggle for us to do our work when we're following the legal process.
And the support has been.
And the support's been overwhelming.
Positive.
One,
I'll deliver the message. I'm sure that David will talk
yeah,
to
we
Jerry.
would
before.
appreciate that. One point that I've not shared with this team at all was several years ago, I happened to be in Anderson's office when he was in there. And his phone rang and it was somebody from Albany, somebody high up in the real estate department. And I started to get up to leave. He said, no, stay here. And he put the person on speakerphone. And at the time, the person told Anderson that there's no such thing as parkland alienation with that particular parcel, with those parcels. There were two different deeds. One said ancillary uses, the other one didn't. So this guy opined that there was no consideration for or concern about anybody challenging us for parkland alienation. And I said to Anderson at the time, well, you're going to make that announcement, aren't you? And he said, hell no. He said, I put up with them enough. I don't want to put up with them more. But that's the kind of thing that needs to be said, because we know they just don't go away.
Well, I think part of the, not the struggle, but the concern I have is that we're not getting calls or communications from the people that are asking us the questions that don't agree with the process, the legal process we followed. I mean, that's so that you can have that one-on-one. So that's why we had the informational meeting to welcome that, to again, go through the data of evidence that we have done. So we will continue to talk about it on Wednesday then.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
And if you would encourage David for that to happen, that would be great.
Absolutely. And I'm sure he'll give you a call, Jerry, before Wednesday's meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else like to speak on that?
No.
All right, I was just thinking of Rush White Springs Farm. What an appropriate name for that property. And yet, remember the threats we got when we went through that process?
Yeah.
And where are they today? Well, because they were false.
Yep.
We can move on to number 3 now. The discussion is advertising for planning board, ZBA and conservation boards.
When I was doing the research for the evidence for the informational meeting, the data, I started with reading lots of minutes and I said, oh, it was in November that we previously last year and the year before directed the town clerk to put an ad out or wherever to accept any letters of interest. Because it was before Jean and Dan were on the board. It was in 2021 when that previous board said they wanted to put those ads out for even if someone was expiring to also see if there's were any of letters of interest. So we did that in 2021, we did it in 2022, we did it in 2023. Obviously, you and I won't be here come that time, but now's the time to get that information out. So
Now is the time.
Jerry and I chatted about it and wanted to we won't authorize it tonight, but we wanted to get the board's input if that was something you wanted to do.
Probably should.
So we'll add that to the agenda on Wednesday for publication.
Yes. Any other comments? Having no further business to conduct,
Can I just? before
that's what
you-
I asked you. Did you have any other comments?
I do, I was just thinking,
Pinch me,
what'd you want?
pinch me.
Pinch you. Thought you said something else. There is one other thing that I don't know if it's attorney-client that we need to maybe have a quick discussion about, but it's not public.
Okay, so
I don't think
We
it
can
is.
end the meeting and then go into attorney-client privilege session,
Okay.
just to be safe.
okay.
I know what I'm now.
So now you can end the meeting, Supervisor.
All right, having no further business to discuss, I hereby declare this meeting adjourned. All in favor?